SAPIEN.
SAPIEN living.
What is the SAPIEN lifestyle?
Mind, body, and spirits.
Hey. We're back. We got Dr. Gary Schliffer. How's it going?
It's going great, Brian. I'm excited to be back and sharing yet another SAPIEN podcast with all of our friends out there.
Our new friends and listeners. Yeah. So we were not super consistent with getting these out, but it's a struggle. I got Peak Human. Dr. Gary's in there doing his doctoring. We got a lot going on, so they're going to come when they come. But this one is really cool. Dr. Joel Gould, he connected with us over the past couple months. He's come into our office, and he's just a great guy. And actually, Gary just got off the phone with him, so I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, guys, Joel Gould is a brilliant guy. I love that he thinks of himself as the second coming of Weston A. Price. I think that's just such a fun kind of, perspective that he has on himself.
Well, he's a dentist. Weston A. Price was a dentist. He traveled the world in 1920s, 30s, and this guy is a dentist as well.
Yeah, Joel's been practicing here in Los Angeles for the last 30 years. He's had his own struggles with autoimmune disorder, specifically inflammatory bowel disease. And like so many of us in this community, has gone through his own journey of self-healing through essentially lifestyle modification. He very much is in line with our SAPIEN ideology, our ideas about ancestral health. But he also he takes it to the next level in that he has a lot of really exciting ideas about the importance of vitamin D, melatonin, sleep hygiene, on top of all this exciting work that we are sort of focused on in the nutrition world. And I think going forward here in 2020 and the years to come, I think there's going to be a lot of really exciting collaborations that we're going to be doing with Joel. He's a really brilliant guy who really knows his research. He's developed some really great ideas about educating young people about sort of ancestral health, using cartoons and using really kind of subtle, simple language and imagery to sort of share the ideas that we're trying to share. I think one of the things me and Brian have talked a lot about is his Peak Human podcast, which I know many of you are listeners. It's so dense and there's so much amazing information there. And it's really hard for people to sometimes listen to all the content. And I think that's something you and me are going to be working on. I know Brian's already got a lot of ideas to help make a lot of his content more accessible. And I think Joel is going to be another step in this puzzle, another piece to this puzzle to help sort of share our message. And he's a really well-spoken guy. I think we barely scratched the surface in this first podcast with him. We focused a lot on his work in the world of sleep apnea, and we barely talked about vitamin D. We definitely talked about his story. So I think a lot of you will be excited to get to know Joel. He, a few years ago, had his own podcast sort of before this whole world of podcasting blew up, and had a lot of exciting guests. And we're sort of in discussions of how we can share a lot of that content through our platform here and just get him involved.
Revive his podcast.
Yeah, he's really, guys, he's a super interesting guy who spent the better part of the last decade researching, learning, doing his own self-experiments, working with his patients to help them find their health again. And I really think that everyone's going to love this episode. I loved doing it. I know we were just absorbing every word he had to say. And I just got off an hour-long talk with him, kind of making the next step plans. So, man, am I excited for all of you to hear it. Please let us know what you think. Give us feedback. We're going to be working really hard in 2020 to get even better content out to you guys. And your feedback is so important to us. I also want to, we'll talk about it more on our season finale here, but I just want to thank everyone for listening and supporting us. I've seen an overwhelming response at my Evolve Healthcare clinic here in Los Angeles. I've gotten a ton of patients coming in looking for sort of, a clinical approach to a lot of the stuff we talk about. And the future's bright, you guys. I'm so excited. So exciting.
Yeah. This is great. You can come in and see us in Evolve Healthcare in Los Angeles. It's up in Woodland Hills. Feel free to reach out online, Dr. Gary Evolve, if you search Twitter or Instagram, and you can go to evolvehealthcare.com and go to sapien.org and find us there and say hi on social media for me, Food Lies. Just search for Food Lies and let's make it happen.
For me, you guys could reach out to me on Dr. Gary Evolve. That's Dr. Gary Evolve. And let's not forget about Food Lies. I think Food Lies is such an exciting project. So much hard work is going into it. Our whole team is working really hard. Our production team, led by Yaniv Fatucci, are just working around the clock. And, as you all know, Brian's done such a great job, raising money to help make this movie happen. We've had so many brilliant minds contribute to the movie, so many amazing transformation stories, and we're just really excited for what's to come here in 2020. So let's share this big podcast with everyone.
We're back. We're back at the SAPIEN headquarters, Evolve Healthcare, Woodland Hills. We have Dr. Joel Gould here. He's a dentist. He's a very interesting guy. We've been connecting online for a couple of months now, actually. And he came in to see Dr. Gary. And now he's back to talk to us about vitamin D, sleep apnea, and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Joel came and saw me not long ago, and we had a really, really great conversation and office visit. Boy, am I excited to learn everything you have for us. I've already started applying some of the things that you taught me regarding vitamin D and supplementation and kind of changing the paradigm with which we think about vitamin D. And
the sun, too.
I mean, all of it. And so I was really excited to have you on the podcast so that we can teach our patients. I think a lot of my patients have started using this podcast as a platform to learn from. I can only tell people so much in the 15, 20 minutes I have with them. So I'm just really excited to be able to share your story, man.
Well, great. And Brian, I actually want to thank you because I have so much information to share with my patients. So when I start to talk about what they should be eating, it's kind of overwhelming. So I literally tell them to download your podcast and start at episode 1, because that roundtable discussion you have with real people saying, well, what do you think? What do I think?
Peak human you were talking about.
Peak human, absolutely.
Peak human. I had my ex-girlfriend and her new sort of vegan boyfriend on the episode 1.
Yeah, I tell my patients to start there because, and it really gets their attention because these are just regular people who want to be healthy, and we've got all this information that's mostly incorrect based on marketing. And here we are at the end of this long line of mishaps and miscommunications that people think is normal,
I mean, there's so many, sort of what we were talking about before we started this podcast, there's so many misunderstandings. Sometimes we like to call them lies. Depending on where you think the motivation is coming from. But I think there's so many misunderstandings that you sort of have to chip away at it. Yeah. Right? You have to take one thing at a time and just...
Well, one of my catchphrases is just because everybody believes something, that doesn't make it true. Yeah. Okay? And that's a really powerful thing because people have these very strong opinions that they're completely not based in science whatsoever. Absolutely. And they're really dangerous. And we're literally, I see this on a daily basis. So,
just to speak to your point, just recently, and because it's timely, I think it's important we bring it up. I think that I went through training thinking that possibly meat can cause cancer. Meat can cause at least some kind of pathology. And now, just recently, as of October 1st, we have a very powerful piece of research that came out by my colleagues in the internal medicine world outlining the idea that meat is not associated, specifically red meat, with any kind of disease process. So, I mean, something so foundational as meat.
It's the first thing. But I want to sort of, I want to explain sort of who I am. I want you guys to understand that I'm old enough to remember back in the late 70s, early 80s, my mother came home one day and said, that's it. We're not eating meat anymore. It's not healthy for us. And I remember my dad came and he had a big thing of salted nuts. And he said, oh, Joel, and he was chomping on them. He said, Joel, these nuts are poison. These are poison. And when I look back and think back to that time and think of how my mother cooked, she went to the butcher and she was kosher, so she would salt her beef and she would do all this stuff. And we had meat every night and she was a fantastic cook. And then as times changed, the two things that really strike me from those times, and this was 1980, 1981, I was a kid in high school, and I started to get fat in the 5th or 6th grade. When I was a sugar addict, cereal was my favorite poison. Yeah. And there was two things that started to change immediately in the 1980s. That was, number one, is meat's no longer good for you. And number two is the sun's dangerous. It didn't exist until that point. In our cupboard, we had cocoa butter. And I remember my mother saying, you got to stay out of the sun now. It causes cancer.
Right.
And then the whole anti-sun lobby was born. And this is a multi-zillion dollar industry. People are making money instilling fear in the hearts of people that the sun is toxic. Now, everyone says, well, the sun causes cancer. And I say, the sun doesn't cause cancer. Inappropriate sun exposure can cause cancer. Water's completely safe to drink, but too much could kill you, right? Mm-hmm. So the origins of this whole stuff that you guys are talking about and what I discovered is based on a time in our lives where marketing and advertising really came together. And this was the birth of the fitness revolution. There was all this stuff. John Travolta was on TV with Jamie Lee Curtis and Perfect. And we've gone through all these different changes that should be making us healthier.
Remember that way.
Absolutely. And so here I am, and as a fat kid, and I started to get fat in 5th or 6th grade, but where things went bad for me, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease at the age of 14, and that changed everything. Wow! Because it put me into the system, and
at that point, sorry to interrupt you. At that point, you already had a weight problem.
Yeah.
Probably, and they weren't probably testing at that time. There were probably metabolic disorders going on. We don't know, right?
Well, yeah. Well, wait. So when you hear like what vitamin D actually is to your body, it'll answer a lot of these questions. So I'm from Canada, and I talk about low vitamin D. I was the second child. My brother was perfectly healthy. So I was born. I was a sickly child. I had colds, flus. I was that kid who was always being brought to the doctor. Colds, flus. I had my tonsils out at age 4. And I had a host of these minor illnesses that resulted in the issue with my craniofacial development. And that is basically a lack of nasal breathing through the mouth, which changes the shape of the jaw and narrows the airway. And which is really fascinating because this is the work of Weston Price. And I was saying earlier that, I don't believe in reincarnation, but if I did, I would say that I'm the reincarnation of Weston Price, because had I found his work or had I known about his work when I was a kid, I would have had a completely different life. And had I been taught his information in dental school, I would have also, at that point in time, I was 19 when I was in dental school, his information is not being taught today. So part of what I want to do is explain to people that your doctor, your dentist, is not being shown a massive portion of real science. It's being, I don't believe in conspiracy theories, but this information is not being shown to our professionals. And if you don't learn about something, how can you know about it? So if you go to a doctor who has no idea what vitamin D is or does, how can you trust that person's opinion? And that's what happened to me. I didn't understand what vitamin D was until 5 years ago when I found out by accident that I had sleep apnea. And, a lot of confusing issues here. What's a dentist talking about sleep for, number one? Number two, what does vitamin D have to do with any of this? And so I'll have a story to tell, and it's interesting stuff. I want people to start to understand that the life that we're living is really not a match for our bodies, which you guys already know that, right?
Well, I just want to, first of all, it's so exciting for me to hear you say this because these are the struggles that I'm going through in real time. I mean, what's a dentist talking about it? Because you're a thoughtful, caring guy that wants to live a good life and stop being miserable. I'm an internal medicine doctor, hadn't heard of Weston A. Price through all of my training, and it took an engineer, a friend of mine, to be like, hey, there's this guy. Look at this guy. He wrote this really great book, and by the way, he's a scientist, and it's based on some real powerful evidence, right?
Sure.
And so I've asked this question on this podcast, and I ask myself every day, how is it possible that our medical education, dental education, scientific learning is so disrupted, like that we are not learning foundational basic principles of how to be healthy. Right. Mm-hmm. And the only solution is, before we go into your story, I've really thought of a solution.
Sure.
It's literally this idea that we are in a sick care society. And it's not so much that it's a conspiracy, it's that money is made on sick people money is not made on healthy people. If you give people a meaningful lifestyle intervention like me and Brian are working on with the SAPIEN diet and lifestyle program, we don't make $1 million doing that because we teach people how to live their life and that's it. They don't need us anymore. Right. Like, thank you. Bye. Right. If Jenny Craig was effective, they wouldn't be a successful business. Right. If like the cardiologist that I see could cure you of heart disease, they wouldn't have business. Right? They'd be out of a job. They'd have nothing to do on call.
Right. All right. Well, okay. So I agree with that perspective, but I want you to think about dentistry. We've been preaching prevention forever.
Yeah.
And not everyone listens because part of this is, what I discovered is this information was out there 90 years ago. This is not a disease of science. This is a disease of communication. It's simple. Weston Price, through the science and technology of his time, did the best that he could. And what I want to explain, who is Weston Price and why should people care?
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So just if anyone who's watching this has not heard of Weston Price, he was a dentist, a Canadian dentist that was practicing in Minnesota. And he wanted to know why all of the patients that he was seeing had terrible decay. And back in the old days, everyone lost their teeth and we did dentures. Now, I've been practicing dentistry for almost 30 years. And back when I started, I worked in some rural areas where I used to do full mouth extractions, extract every tooth and put in a set of dentures. And this was normal up until about 30 years ago. Okay. So people had terrible teeth. He wanted to know, well, who's got good teeth and what can we learn from them? So what he ended up doing was seeking out populations who still had dental health and finding out what was the unifying factor. He traveled to 14 countries on 5 continents.
Amazing, right?
Yeah, incredible.
Amazing.
Incredible. And he documented his stuff with photographs. And at that time, they didn't know what DNA was. They didn't really know what vitamins were. They were just getting into this. And so what he did is he wrote this incredible book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. And what he stated was that it wasn't a disease process that was causing dental decay, gum disease, and the loss of room for all of our teeth. And there's all these orthodontists trying to widen people's smiles, that it was actually a lack of proper nutrition. Too simple to be true. Okay. And since his time 90 years ago, all the science that I discovered when I found out who he was supports his theories. And not only that, what he was trying to do with his book, he wrote it for the layperson, and he put all those pictures in because he was so determined to share his information. He was trying to figure out, what can I do to get people to listen? And at that time, photography, there were no textbooks that showed you those before. And you could see his twins, one with terrible teeth and one with great teeth. And he's saying, look, this twin follows an ancestral diet and this one doesn't. So basically, Weston Price was the first person, one of the first people to publicly say, hey, there's a change going on when cultures change from their Aboriginal ways, their tribal ways, and start to eat modern processed foods. But it was more than just what they were eating. It was their lifestyle. They went from being without clothing, living connected to nature, eating whole foods and animals, and eating all the parts of the animals, to eating refined sugar and carbohydrates. That was the insane change.
And only muscle meat when they did eat.
Exactly. And the tribal elders, they would get the first dibs at the good stuff, the stuff that we went for throughout all of evolutionary history. So,
in a way, and maybe someone else has said this before, I think I'm becoming a doctor who's focused on ancestral health, right? And I think that's the ethos of SAPIEN. I think that's the message that you're sharing with us. Absolutely. And in a way, Weston Price is the father of ancestral health, right? Yeah, he is the original. Yeah. He didn't even probably realize it at the time. And I think I'm just realizing it now that in a way, he is the one who started this in the modern era anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's where the photography comes in. To anyone who's really interested in like natural health, order that book, support Weston A. Price Foundation. Yeah. These guys are the genuine thing. They really care. All those different people who are associated with them. These are people I've interviewed on my podcast a few years ago. And these are really like the salt of the earth people who care. Yeah. And they're trying to present this information in a really meaningful way instead of screaming. And, that's kind of what I want to do. You see, I'm wearing one of my cartoon creations. Is that, I want to
Similarly, Brian and the Food Lies team went out and interviewed Sally Fallon and a few others.
The founder of Weston Price, and I was on the Wise Traditions podcast, which is the Weston Price podcast.
So there's already, for those that are want to learn more, check out the Food Lies YouTube page, and there's some really great content on there. If you're not quite ready for the book, because I do think it's daunting. Like, we are so passionate. We're healthcare providers.
That
Brian,
book is not fun. It's like
it's not, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying, like, I've chipped away at
500
it.
pages.
But this is my career. This is my life, right? This is your career. This is Brian's whole life. I don't know if he does anything else except think
Not
about
much,
ancestral
no.
health. But I think for people that are excited about what you're talking about, definitely start there.
Yeah.
Start there. And
Well, one of the after being somebody who's been in both Canada and the U.S., where medicine is socialized, there as a doctor and a victim, a sick person, and spending the next 20 years here, I've been in one location for almost 19 years. And unlike most of medicine, I have the same people I've been seeing for almost 20 years. And seeing what people go through in their life, I see when people get sick, I see when they recover and when they don't. And medicine these days isn't practiced that way. The family doctor's gone. You have a few minutes with the patient. I'm seeing different generations. I'm seeing the kids. I'm seeing the grandparents. And so dentists are kind of, we're primary healthcare professionals in that most people will come to us. They don't view us that way, which I'm fine with, but I'm one who has a consistent vision of these people. I also see them lying down with the light shining down their airway. And, the mouth is the window to your health.
it is. We use teeth as a way of establishing what someone's health was like. I mean, that's archaeology. That's anthropology. That's how we know early human history.
But just think about what the mouth area, it's breathing, it's eating, it's communicating, it's all
Flora.
these things.
It's part of our microbiota.
Absolutely. And if you think about the human homunculus and how we're sensory innervated, you see a man with giant fingers and huge lips and a mouth. That's what your brain is seeing when you're out in the world. That's, those are the things that your brain's paying attention to.
And then when we're growing up and we're children, we're learning through our mouth, right? Babies and infants are putting things in their mouth. That's how they learn about the world. It's one of the ways they process things. We communicate with other humans through kissing, right? These are primary
speech, singing, language, all that stuff.
Well, and you know what goes first with health is your teeth. Like these vegans that lose their health, their teeth fall out. Right? It's like the sign.
So I'm gonna explain that. I'm gonna
Had to throw in some anti-vegan stuff.
As soon as you could. I love it.
Well, it's hard for me too because I have my young patients who are like, oh no, I'm plant-based. I'm like, all right, and that's where I send them to your podcast because I want them to be de-socialized from that nonsense and understand who's now backing vegans and who's backing plant-based everything. As you know who it is, it's the people who stand to make the most money.
But and again, since it's timely, and I always try to bring these up as we're going. Recent publication this week from the British Medical Journal talking about how cognitive function and IQ levels are declining in people following these plant-based diets. And so I've actually, that's so powerful, right?
BMJ,
BMJ is huge, everyone. And I say this because I've been personally struggling with the idea of being open and accepting to people. And, I have vegan and vegetarian patients, but I've started to take a very firm stance and say, look, you can do whatever you want, but do not pretend a plant-based diet is a human diet. It is not a human diet. It's a survival diet. Maybe it's something that we can eat during wartime when there's famine, but it's not a thriving, rich.
That was our fallback food. It was always our fallback food. We always wanted animal meat, and we only ate vegetables if we couldn't find what we really wanted. That's the basic. So now the thing I want to talk about is that, I start off talking about vitamins and hormones and that. So I don't want to supplement anything I can get naturally.
Yeah.
When you follow a meat diet, you're getting so much more nutrition that you don't have to supplement as much. You still, need to at some point, but, what's fascinating is like even just the whole megafauna idea. Now, being from Canada, having worked up north, the amount of moose and deer I had to avoid. There's an awful lot of wildlife up there and I'm not talking far north. We're just talking north of the Canadian border. And this wildlife exists with us or without us. And we know what we're not doing is utilizing all this territory in the north where all these big animals actually evolved. And we could be farming those sustainably, let them have a great life. And, this is a completely fixable problem.
And they've convinced people that we can't feed the world with meat or that somehow meat is not sustainable. I hear that so much. And by the way, again, I have to bring it up because it pissed me off. At the end of the article about by the internal medicine saying that red meat is good for you, they hedge their bets, and this really upset me. It's the last paragraph, and they could have left it out, but they hedge their bets. They're like, well, we're here analyzing the literature on the nutritional and the health benefits, but of course it's possible that there are environmental and ethical issues. And it's like, oh, well, when it comes to raising meat, and it's like, no, actually, no, there's not. And whoever was in that room that made them put that in, I know that there's a bunch of smart doctors sitting there that know that that's not true, but they had to put it in for political correctness. It was for some bizarre reason, and it really upset me. I have to say. Man.
It's still a start. You have to understand that the more voices, we live in this bubble where we think everyone understands what a ketogenic diet is and what, The cool part is, as bad as it is that the keto movement has been going to be hijacked by the marketers and all this crazy stuff, is that the reality is ketogenic is producing ketones. And the what I really feel like is we're at a point where knowledge is the ultimate power, because anyone with a smartphone can go and be a researcher. But the thing is that there's so much nonsense out there. What I'm trying to do is show people a common sense story of why our health has gone off the rails. And the reason that I feel like I can have a strong voice in this is that I'm not going to back down. I have almost 30 years experience as a clinician, treating people one-on-one with my own hands. As a dentist, I literally have to fix people's mouths. You can do a lot of great stuff, but ultimately the body heals itself. I have to fix something that's not going to get fixed on its own. So it's giving me a little different perspective. And then the other thing is that if you don't speak up, who's going to? And the reason that I'm never going to give up this information that I've come across is because this affected my life profoundly. So until the age of 48, I suffered on a daily basis from Crohn's disease. Anybody who doesn't know what Crohn's disease is, it's an inflammatory bowel disease. It's genetic. And I was told when I was a kid it was caused by my neurotic personality and my Eastern European Jewish genes. And I was like, great. So I just basically lost the genetic lottery. And now I'm going to be a sick person for my whole life. And that's how I was socialized as a sick person. And I just accepted it because it's not as bad as a lot of different illnesses. Just creating a life around your bathrooms for 48 years. And then I think of every special event of my life is just all about where the bathrooms were. And either people who have a loved one who has these issues, or even people just have IBS, just so people understand that your doctor doesn't know the stuff that I discovered. And I reversed my Crohn's disease completely by accident in the reversal of my sleep apnea. Everyone thinks that sleep apnea is caused by obesity. It's your fault. You let yourself go, and now you have this fat tongue that's going to choke you. And again, just because everybody believes something, that doesn't make it true. So I want to start to dispel these myths. What is sleep apnea? Who gets it? And what's the root cause? And that's kind of, the talk that we have here. So we'll get what I want to just review. A vitamin D is not a vitamin. What is a vitamin? Vitamin is something that's vital. You have to take in. Well, vitamin D acts like a hormone. A hormone is something that we usually produce ourselves and it acts on multiple different tissues. But vitamin D is really unique because it's a hormone that we make from sun exposure. Now, you can get it by eating. So if you eat an animal that made a lot of vitamin D, where are you going to find that? In the guts, especially the liver, where you find all organ nutrients, meat. Organ meat, exactly. But we were designed to make it outside in the sun on our skin. And what people don't necessarily know is that this is something that's made on your skin. Your skin has got a ton of cholesterol. Cholesterol is a good thing. I would never want to take anything that would interfere with my synthesis of cholesterol, considering it's so important that I can make it in every cell in my body, I can make it in my liver, and I can also eat it. So when cholesterol receives UVB radiation, one bond, now it's 7-dehydroxycholesterol. If anyone's going to want to complain about how unsciency, I don't want to bore people, but basically a version of cholesterol in your skin is transformed. A photon in the UVB range breaks one carbon-carbon bond, and you have this rigid molecule that is basically the building blocks of all of our biology. Cholesterol is a starter molecule for testosterone, for estrogen,
all
for
hormones,
all the hormones. Okay, and it's cool. This is a molecule that animals use. Plants don't use cholesterol.
This is a molecule that has been vilified for the last 60 years. Depleted from our diet, and now we just see epidemic of disease related to all these hormone deficiencies.
Absolutely.
And here you are, Joel, explaining to people how important and essential it is. So thank you.
No worries, it's essential. And so you're taking this is your starter molecule. Mother Nature is so smart. She doesn't make a bunch of totally different things. She recycles. Mother Nature invented recycling, and Mother Nature favors collaboration. A monocrop is the most insane thing. It's the absolute opposite of what Mother Nature wants. She wants every critter that's out there to be trampling around, the poop of the animals ground into the soil, the microbes are eating it up. The Impossible Burger, to me, it's impossible to eat that because it's impossible to put into any foodstuff what Mother Nature has created for us. We're the evolutionary descendants of animals. We're the top of the food chain. Nobody, we win. But we are so much like those other animals. We're mammals. So we're all the same. So it's just really fascinating that people have sort of, they put us on a pedestal. We're animals. And what I want people to understand is that we're ultimately hunter-gatherers. And, I like to think of us as modern hunter-gatherers because our bodies are unchanged since those times. But the world that we're living in has nothing to do with that. We're really literally not providing what we need. So when it comes to the vitamin D on your skin, this is the craziest part. When you break that one bond, you have this rigid molecule. Now it can rotate on two different axes. And if you can think of a hula hoop that's rigid and you cut it and it gets this really weird sensation, when that one photon breaks that carbon-carbon bond, you have now stored the energy of the sun in your body. That is, that's really what it is. Because humans didn't need vitamin D when we lived in the zone of guaranteed sunlight. But as we started to push in different directions, our need to store the energy of the sun became, the most important thing. And that's why skin tones decrease as you get away from the equator. Someone in Iceland has the least amount of vitamin D and the least amount of vitamin K2, which those go together. And somebody in the tropics of the equator has the most sunlight and the most K2. That's why we see different skin tones, body types. And this storage of vitamin D is really, it allowed us as a species to travel outside of that zone of guaranteed sunlight. And it brings me back to my real discovery is that humans are solar powered animals. We literally are run by sunlight. And one of the things I shared with you guys is that vitamin D is just one of the things that we make from sunlight. We make so many different things. And the scientists that I discovered in my investigation are mind-blowing. No one's listening to them, of course. They speak science. And that's sort of what I feel like my job is to communicate that difference. So vitamin D is not a vitamin. It's a hormone, but I would challenge your idea of what vitamins are and where they come from because Mother Nature wasn't dumb. She's like, okay, if I make a hunter-gatherer and it's winter and they're walking around, there's no vegetables and there's no food, where are they going to get their water-soluble vitamins from? Well, we carry a pharmacy, and that's our gut microbiome. And this is a symbiotic relationship where we protect them, give them food, and they give us chemicals. Their DNA outnumber ours 100 to 1. And so even though every cell in your body has a copy of your DNA, we're really reliant on those microbes. Mother Nature would never let us walk around without our own pharmacy. There was no CVS. There was no, So the understanding of gut,
that.
yeah.
Cool concept.
So what I want to explain to people, so what's the big deal about vitamin D? Why, vitamin C was a big thing, and for a while vitamin E was a big thing. What's the difference about vitamin D? Well, the story about vitamin D is when your vitamin D level is low, your body thinks it's winter, okay? So humans have two settings, normal and hibernation. Just like other animals, we can't fly south for the winter, okay? So when winter comes to us, the first thing that happens is the D level goes down and it changes the microbiome because vitamin D regulates what type of bacteria are going to stay there. And how does vitamin D do that? Well, we have to go to the basics of like, what is vitamin D? And just real briefly, we have to talk about what are enzymes and what are your immune cells. So I want to keep it like really not that sciencey, but it's important people to understand what vitamin D does. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So most of your body's functions are run by enzymes. I consider enzymes to be like the worker bees of your cell. And I have a character, Enos, which is endothelial nitric oxide synthase. And I drew him as a robot submarine that joins together. Sometimes it joins, it makes nitric oxide, but endothelial nitric oxide synthase should be more famous for making cholesterol sulfate, which is a whole different discussion. But an enzyme is the worker bee of your cell, and it does reactions, okay? An enzyme can be one protein, it can be multiple proteins. Where we see this a lot is when it comes to your metabolism, all the different enzymes that make you be able to digest food, okay? So we make all of the enzymes that we have from our DNA, and we copy our DNA, and that actually gets folded up to produce these enzymes. So that process is more complicated than I just made it out to be, but we use our own DNA as a blueprint and different cells will copy different stretches of that DNA. A colonocyte, a cell in the colon, will copy very specific stuff compared to a lung cell or a heart cell. Different cells will focus on, this is my area that I copy. Okay. So what vitamin D is that it's an epigenetic moderator. And in English, what that means is it helps your DNA open for copying. Okay. And this is one of the most profound epigenetic moderators, because without vitamin D, you will not transcribe or copy all of your genes. So if this is your genome and your vitamin D, as it starts to drop, your access to your own DNA gets more and more limited. This is your winter zone. Now, growing up in Canada, I lived my entire life. No one ever measured my vitamin D level. I was probably never higher than a 30. And once I raised my vitamin D level up to the 60 zone, everything changed. I was able to bring in the right gut bacteria. I was able to transcribe all of the genes that I had. Some of them had never been used before. Turned them on. And that's what it is. And so that just brings me back down to, like, we're solar powered. Without the energy of the sun, and you can take exogenous vitamin D, because you have to think about, we're sitting here wearing clothing and you're walking out on the street from the car to the house. Where are you making vitamin D from? And people think, oh, I get a ton of sunlight. I walk my dog twice a day. I'm like, what time do you walk your dog? At 9 and at 5. Like,
and I always tell, one of
my
my biggest recommendations is, wake up and get that sun exposure, set your biorhythms, get that vitamin D. And sure enough, everyone's got all their clothes on. And I'm like, take your shirt off, go out there in your underwear. You have an empty back, like, be an animal.
Right. Well, again, so basically, I ended up, with all my information I found, I ended up writing a book called The Modern Epidemic. And that book is really about what is chronic disease. And Weston Price discovered this, but it's literally a separation of humans from their evolutionary origin, from the environment, from their natural environment. And so what we need to do to correct this, we need to reconnect to nature.
Be an animal.
Be an animal, absolutely. Well, I consider it more tribal life. So I say the cure to the modern epidemic is tribal life. And that is going back to all of our ancestors and saying, what did they do that kept them happy and healthy? And we're not doing any of that. We're not outside with our clothes off. So I have all kinds of stuff that I'm tailoring to help people to understand that, but make it fun, because a doctor telling you to take vitamins is not interesting. So,
well, it's not, and it's just not just taking vitamins. It's really living a whole lifestyle. It's not just, you're really preaching to the choir with us. But for me, whenever I hear the science, I'm fascinated by it. But I'm always thinking, how can I apply it clinically? What can I teach my patients that they can actually take home with them? And so,
I'm going to use some practical applications.
Let's talk about that.
I'm in the trenches. So the first thing I want people to know is that this is not a new epidemic under any circumstances. I've sent some pictures with Schlitz beer, the sunshine beer, and this is in the 1920s and 30s. So people knew about this. It just got lost in the shuffle. It really did. Okay?
All of it, though. We knew that animal fats are good for us. We knew that steak and eggs, liver and onions were a staple of a healthy diet.
Yeah.
We knew that, relationships were important, that you should really lean into your, like, the tribalism, lean into your family, lean into your friends.
Real connections.
Look at someone in the eye when you're talking to them,
Not likes on your phone.
Not likes on your phone, or be vulnerable, share your, the epidemic is it's not just what we're eating, what we're doing, it's what we're not doing. And, so there's so many thoughts, but, like, one of the saddest things, and I hate to interrupt you, but just the saddest thing I see are the younger people. So I'm in my 30s. You're older than that. You remember a time that was different. Yeah. I was a kid, and I remember that, like, liver and onions thing. That's how I remember. Like, I remember that there was this life that existed before all this technology and all this insanity with media. The 19-year-old girl whose mom brings to me to get, like, some real advice because she's just miserable and, like, slowly spiraling out of control. She has no idea what a normal human animal really looks like when they're thriving. They're used to these sort of frail, doughy, no muscle tone, pale, sort of depressed and down people. And so, like, I love that we're doing this on video because you're thriving, you're energetic, we're always fired up. And people are like, oh, you're so fired up, you're so this is normal.
Right.
This is what it's like when you take care of yourself and you give a shit.
Well, also, I want you to think about the people that you know who are older. If we think about Mark Sisson, how different he looks than everyone. I'm 53, okay? And I lived most of my life with the body of Homer Simpson, and it wasn't until I realized how my body worked that I start to see the changes. But as people get older, they think that what they see as aging is normal, and it is absolutely not. One of the things I like to talk about is what is death by natural causes? What was that all about? So, how is the human life supposed to come to an end? And it sort of will bring me back to vitamin D and being solar powered.
It triggered me so many things. I can't even write death by natural causes when I'm writing a death certificate. So I write a lot of death certificate. I do end of life care and hospice. I can't write that. I have to come up with like some diagnosis.
Well, I'm going to give you so just a little hint of this. So in the old days, the best way to die would be in your sleep. Just going to drift away in your sleep. So that death in sleep is actually from sleep apnea. And the problem is that kids have this now. And so what I'm describing is an actual syndrome of premature aging. And that's what is going on with people, is that we're so out of whack that people's bodies are aging prematurely. And then, people think it's normal to have a hip replacement and a joint replacement. This isn't normal. This is never normal. Why is this happening? Well, when I get to the whole syndrome, because the food component is massive. So when I talk about being separated from the elements of life, it's air, earth, fire, and water. So earth is obviously the food that we eat, the nutrients in it, how we eat, and how we eat is more important than what we eat. And that has to do with intermittent fasting and why it's so profoundly strong and what it does for
powerful.
You. So that's one of my topics. And the other thing is when you see all these medications being advertised on TV, they say, tell your doctor if you have tuberculosis. Well, first of all, how many patients have come to you and told you that? Okay.
That's nuts.
Right.
So, TV, even advertising to patients drugs, but
it's terrible. So only in the U.S. and New Zealand, no other
it's
place.
Illegal.
It's illegal everywhere else in the world.
Let's repeat that just so that other people listening understand. It is illegal to market prescription drugs directly to consumers, to patients, everywhere else in the world, except you said New Zealand.
New Zealand and the U.S. Yeah.
What are we doing when my patient comes to me and says, hey, can I try that new antidepressant Savella? Maybe that'll help my fibromyalgia.
Right.
What?
Well, the pharmaceutical industry has not sworn to do no harm, just so you know. They've sworn an oath to their shareholders, and it's up to us to say, hey, wait a second, what's going on. But what I think is interesting about that whole tell your doctor if you have tuberculosis or if you have swelling of the face, lips, mouth, and throat, I'm going to call somebody. But this tuberculosis thing is that people don't know that this is not in our memory of that tuberculosis was a massive worldwide epidemic. It's still going on today. And in the old days, prior to antibiotics, the treatment and cure for tuberculosis was going to a sanatorium where the medical treatment was lying in the sun. And I have pictures in my book of people literally lying in hospital beds. That's the cure. And what does that tell us? That's insane. So the reason that the doctors warned about tuberculosis is that what people still don't know is those medications with those warnings, they actually lower your own vitamin D. So something like prednisone that I was put on at the age of 14 will sequester vitamin D to lower your vitamin D. So you take somebody who's already vitamin D deficient, that's why they're sick in your office, and then you put them on medications that further lower. That's why cancers have happened. Because as this goes on, part of the information I want to share is that the actual suicide switch is controlled by the mitochondria, and it's reliant on vitamin D. And it's actually a lack of autophagy or ability to shut down the cellular function that lets cancer grow out of control. And all this stuff is tightly regulated by your mitochondria. So that's what this all comes down to. And that's why a ketogenic diet, eating meat, reducing those carbs and sugar is so healthy, because it gives your mitochondria the right fuel to not produce all of the toxic chemicals that are going to come out with it. So like I was saying that, humans are hybrids. We're just like a Prius where you burn electricity or gas, and everyone wants to be burning electricity. That's fat. Sugar is gasoline. It's got terrible pollution products, and it's pollution to your body. When your body's burning these fuels, it's supposed to be burning fat all the time and sugar occasionally when you're in fight or flight mode. You want to have sugar there. We don't store sugar in our bodies. We store some glycogen. We store fat. That's our fuel source. So all this stuff is tied together with how we evolved on this planet. We didn't have any of those foods. So anyway, so the tuberculosis thing is kind of mind-blowing.
We have slides, by the way. We can put this up for
Yeah,
people
so
who are just
Are
listening.
you comfortable with us sharing those?
I'd be thrilled if you share them
Yeah.
because they all have the scientific citations. Most of what I talk about seems so off the wall to people who haven't been thinking about this that I literally have pitched this around the world. And the first question people ask me is, do you have any proof of this? And I'm like, do I have proof?
This is another sticky point for me. We have created a world where you need to create a double-blind placebo-controlled study to justify saying that sun exposure is good for you. If that doesn't reflect the poisonous environment that we live in, I don't know what does. And so while I appreciate what you're doing and so, it's common sense. There's evidence. There's a million research papers to support both ways.
Right. Okay.
People have to just open their minds to the facts.
So I want to explain one of my like things that I say a lot is that science without common sense is dangerous. Okay. I don't need a scientific study to tell me certain things. It's just obvious. Okay. So the reason I include citations is because I'm straddling the world of make-believe and science, and I'm a communicator with a scientific background. So when I say these things, I don't want somebody saying, well, you can't prove that. That's why when I make a major point, there's going to be a citation. Now, studies can be used, who did them, what's their bias. They can be turned and twisted depending on who you are and what you want to say. You can cherry pick. But when we talk about something like a meta-analysis, my favorite is the big one that came out recently about vitamin D, and it said, we have no clear evidence that vitamin D is useful, not even for healthy bones. So that's really terrifying because you can look at a meta-analysis and my patients will they'll tear out articles and say, see, it's not that important. Why are you bugging me about this? And I'll say, well, as a scientist, I'm going to look into each study. And when it comes to vitamin D, there's a 50-50 split between vitamin D was very helpful and vitamin D was not helpful. And the paradigm I want you to think about is water. So prior to the 1980s, people who were dehydrated could show up at the emergency room. They could be passing out. They'd have cold, clammy skin. They'd be vomiting, and they'd say, "What's wrong with this person? Let's give them water." Okay, and so when they give people water, they feel better. I'm like, wow, this water is really great. We should start prescribing it to people because it helps everything. So when I started to dig into the scientific studies on vitamin D, every different scientist would do a study and they'd say, wow, we gave people vitamin D and it helped with their particular area of interest. They'd be like, we need further research. And this is going all across the board. And I said, turn everything upside down. What if every single person that you're seeing is vitamin D deficient? And giving just some vitamin D, it's so critical to health that even just giving some gives you what you were looking for. This shows that your study was appropriate. And then, well, why don't all the studies say vitamin D is great? Well, doctors don't learn about vitamin D. They don't understand. And half the studies, they gave a dose of vitamin D and never took a blood level. This is a hormone that circulates in your blood. You want to measure the level. And then the ones that were positive were where they actually did a blood level or they gave a therapeutic dose. Some studies, they gave 1,000 IU for 3 months and said, no results. Yeah. And the other studies, ones that showed higher doses where they took levels, it makes perfect sense. So I want people to think about their vitamin D as a reservoir, like a California reservoir. And every day we're using up that water and the level's lowering and we're not refilling it. Okay. So you can see, when you drive by some of those reservoirs that were way, way down, that's what is happening to us. Humans who live outdoors have a vitamin D level at 60 to 80 range. That's normal. Everyone walking around's level is completely incidental or accidental. Are you lucky? Did you forget to put on some sunscreen that one day? And that's a whole separate topic is what sunscreen is. But when you think about this, your vitamin D level, you're going to fill your reservoir. Nothing works right until you reach a certain point. Then when you get up to here, your vitamin D replete, meaning that your body has enough energy of the sun to power all the reactions. We'll go back to what vitamin D does. It helps you transcribe your genes. Where this really comes into play is in the production of something called cathepsidins and defenses. And this is the most basic level of why vitamin D is so profound. Your immune cells, your macrophages, your neutrophils, your T cells, all these different cells, they require vitamin D to copy their favorite area, which is a stretch of proteins called antimicrobial neuropeptides. These are the proteins that your immune cells will spray on bacterial invaders, viruses, fungus, bacteria. This is what prevents leaky gut. This is your body's immune system that will literally kill these pathogens that are normal to us. But your body won't make them unless your D level is up past a certain point. And I say, I never want my patients to be below 40. 50 is great. And for sleep, that's my focus, 60 to 80. That's my goal. Doctors.
What are most
test
people
it.
at though, just for reference?
I mean, I'm curious. Just in my clinical practice, I would say the average vitamin D. First of all, I have seen, like, in the last few months, like 3 or 5 vitamin Ds over 40.
Only
One of
there.
them.
Yeah.
You're one of them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And then I have seen, and again, we can actually pull this research from my EHR, which we will one day because I'm just collecting so much evidence. But I mean, I have seen so many people under 20 in the teens. It's horrifying.
It's terrible.
It's horrifying. And a lot of those people are on low-fat diets.
Yep.
They're on...
Well, they're on all kinds of medications as well. These are sick people, and that's what
They're
I
not,
was.
though.
Well,
they're not, though. They're like a 34-year-old
Supposedly normal.
girl who works in an office who, wants her skin to look good so she doesn't get like sun exposure. She doesn't eat meat because it's vilified. She's not sick yet, Joel.
Right. It's
coming down the
it's
pipeline.
coming. Yeah. And so the interesting thing that I've noticed, and I've been following this for a while. So UCLA, their vitamin D scores used to be 30 to 100. Where below 30 you were deficient.
Yeah.
And now they've changed it from 20 to 50, where anything over 50 is called toxic. So my patients are coming in, showing me their test. Look, I'm toxic. And I say, you guys know I don't supplement vitamin D in the summer. And that I was in Spain for a week. I came back, my level was 98, 99. When we tested, I was probably 75 or something like that.
Pretty good.
But so doctors are being misinformed. And I want to see one peer-reviewed study that allowed a major medical chain in a state where people follow what we do that says that anything over 50 is toxic. And this gets us into the discussion is that did hunter-gatherers go, oh shoot, I better put on my hat and some sunscreen. And did they absorb too much calcium if their vitamin D level was too high? Because that's a lot of fear-mongering. And doctors know what vitamin K2 is. Vitamin D was never available without K2. They go together. Vitamin D makes you absorb calcium from the foods that you eat. Vitamin K2 manages where the calcium goes, puts it into your teeth and bones. We find the proteins in your mouth that bind calcium. So
what's a good source of K2 for those listening?
it doesn't exist. You have to supplement it. There's something called natto, which is Japanese, and it's kind of disgusting.
Yeah, it's gross. Well, you eat animal foods. You can eat. There's
grass-fed. So we would
you're
get
eating
our
nose to
K2.
tail.
We'll get our K2 from the milk and meat of animals that eat green growing grass. So just eating meat alone will raise your K2.
But not just meat. Healthy meat.
Yes.
Right? Like,
yes.
It's just coming back a little bit to our like concept of sapien and our obsession with food is if you really eat healthy animals, you will be a healthy animal.
Absolutely.
Well, you are what you eat.
I learned a lot, and I had a big fear that animals were being fed nothing but grain and corn, and I was very happy to find that the majority of animals that we get in the supermarket have actually been grass-fed most of their life, which is great. That's great.
I learned a lot about, there's a lot of vilification of our, factory farming system, and Brian did this debate with some in a meat or in a food conference, and we learned so much about our factory farming system, and so much of it is nonsense that we've been taught, and really we have pretty decent quality meat, and if you can't afford grass-fed beef, you could still eat normal beef, and you're still going to get a lot of great nutrients.
Well, hey, listen, we're on the same side. Yeah. So when we think about like how could this one thing be so powerful? Well, first of all of life evolved from the energy of the sun. Plants, they start off. Humans are a perfect foil for the plants. We produce what they use, and they produce what we use. It's a perfect fit. Mother Nature invented recycling, right? That's her
symbiotic.
Thing. Exactly. So, when it comes to, I have some of my charts showing all the diseases associated with vitamin D. Are these really diseases?
Yeah.
And each individual specialty, they're looking at this part of the body saying, this is a disease. How could this one thing be in control of everything? Well, the primary reason is, number one, this cathecydin business regulates gut bacteria. I have studies, not that we need them, that show that there's a specific gut bacteria that produce all of the chemicals that keep us healthy, and those are the B vitamins. Okay? So in the winter, your regular gut bacteria disappears because the vitamin D itself, the cathecydins are dictating. The colon lining is very specific, will release cathepsidins, just the cells themselves, not including the immune cells as well. So any barrier cells can produce these cathepsidins. And in the gut, it starts to tell, hey, we don't want you, you're bad. Hey, we want you, you're a good commensal bacteria. And one of my mentors is a neurologist by the name of Stasha Gomanak, and she literally saved my life. And her discovery is that, hey guys, these are the 4 bacteria that require vitamin D and to be present to make B vitamins. B vitamins, I call them Mother Nature's helpers because these things are the fuel that your body uses for everything. They are the substrates. They are the cofactors. They are interdigitated into every aspect of our health as these silly B vitamins that we get from our gut bacteria that we don't get from eating a bunch of vegetables. We don't get them, okay? If you eat animals, you get all those B vitamins, but if there's no animals for 2-3 weeks, your gut bacteria should be making that. So when the D level goes down, the good bacteria that favor muscle building and growth, they disappear. And what's left is fungus that sends a signal to via the gut-brain axis, gives you a signal to eat sugar and carbs. And that's the signal I got for most of my life, 48 years.
That's what I posted about
That's
today.
so fascinating.
That's so funny that I posted that today randomly. I didn't know. Oh, I guess.
I don't know. I haven't checked my Instagram feed.
I have the gut. I called the sugar monster. Is the sugar monster talking to you? And it was a cartoon of the gut talking to the person. Right. And I've seen it. I've been on all sides of it where you're fed. It's telling you to eat more of it. And then if you go away, I've not had anything for weeks and weeks, and I'm like, oh, I don't even need it. I don't need dessert. What are you talking about? Yeah.
Well, this was an evolutionary advantage to our ancestors. Okay, imagine 15,000 years ago. First of all, if you went to a grocery store 15,000 years ago, what would be on the shelves? Just meat. Some meat and seafood. Okay, some dried out tubers. Okay, but if we think about what our ancestors did is that they weren't thinking about eating a healthy, balanced diet. They were just doing their thing.
Survival, absolutely. So that signal, that's saved, that's a constant signal. I don't know if you know who T.S. Wiley is. She wrote a book called Sugar Lights Out 25 years ago, saying, hey guys, you need to pay attention to the sugar is like one of the root causes of all this stuff. And it absolutely is. But the understanding that this was something, that we were into fruit in season when the fruit would drop. And there's also the drunk monkey concept of evolution where this sugar would ferment. Yeah. And think about where we would get our drinking water from. Most of our times as humans, we drank kombucha because there was no fresh tap water. They'd have that good bacteria sitting in there and people would be drinking that stuff. Kombucha is fermented sugar. Pretty much, right? Yeah. So this whole system for winter, now people, their D-level drops, I call it permanent winter or human power saving mode. It's literally when your phone says, 20% power less, it shuts down all non-essential functions. That's why everyone's walking around these days. When your vitamin D level is below 20, and it's below 20 because you don't know that you should be monitoring it, your body's now stuck in a state of winter. So any new cell that gets made, your body's like, I only have so much vitamin D. This part of the genome, this is the really important part. I'll die if I don't copy this stuff. Right. This stuff, let it go. It makes it only the essential.
Essential. Absolutely. You're literally in human power saving mode.
Well, it's why we always say that like these vegetable plant-based diets are a survival diet. They're not a thriving diet. And that's why people get sick gradually over time.
Right. That's cool. So, and when I started out in this, I wrote an 850-page book that even I couldn't read. But I wanted to go through it and say, this is the story. And I put in all these citations. Mercifully, over the last 2-3 years, some really cool scientists have put together some studies, like I have one on aging and vitamin D. And basically to understand what aging is, we talk about the free radical theory of aging and how if you eat a bunch of sugar and carbs or a plant-based diet, you're speeding your demise. You're literally prematurely aging, okay? And so the whole process of aging has to do with the balance between repair and wear, okay? So all of life is about cycles. If you have a flat line, you're dead. So it's all about peaks and valleys. So all non-nocturnal life evolved with light and dark periods that we know of as day and night. This is the energy of the sun or the absence. So when I say humans are solar powered animals, it makes perfect sense. And where do we take in sunlight? Well, for sure through our eyes, we know that, telling our pineal gland something, but also our skin. Our skin is the major sensor.
Photoreceptors in our ears too.
There's some really great scientists that I want to bring forward. And I've got one guy basically showed that just even radiation around your eyes
Yep.
will stimulate all kinds of crazy stuff. So, wearing sunglasses is a whole different discussion. But so basically, what everyone's doing is walking around in a state of permanent winter, and this is bad. This is harmful. So I like to think, when you go to a doctor, the first and most important thing is checking the D level, because all the other hormones will be off. If your D level is down, your thyroid hormone's going to be off. And the whole list of everything, you can look up studies that show your testosterone will be low, your estrogen will be low. All these things are related. So to me, it's the most basic thing.
And everything you just mentioned is all made out of cholesterol.
All made of
I just
cholesterol.
want to keep re-emphasizing that because it's something I have to beat into my patients' heads because they've been so trained to not eat cholesterol.
Right.
And it's so
Right.
important and vital.
Right.
And I worry that so much of what we see is not just vitamin D deficiency, but it's like the poisoning of our lipid
Absolutely.
system in our body.
Okay, so and that brings me to, why do I have a cartoon character of hydrogen? Okay, so I created a cast of characters that I call the heroes of light. And these are the chemicals in your body that will keep you healthy. Cholesterol is traditionally cast as the villain, but in my book, she's a hero. She's queen of the hydrophobes and your mini repair person. So fat is an essential part of your body. There's two zones in your body. There's the fat part, all of your cell membranes, and there is the aqueous part, your blood and your cytoplasm. And your whole body is ordered by your heart's pumping and everything's getting pushed through all these semi-permeable membranes. And the borderline is that fat, that membrane. And once that fat membrane starts to break down, stuff starts to leak through and you're just wasting your time chasing all these free radicals that can now escape into the zones that are supposed to be separate. So I drew cholesterol as your mini repair person with a little crown. And she's cute, she's fat, and she gets transformed into vitamin D. And so cholesterol really needs to be rethought of. And, it's one of those things where I think that you posted something and I said, I think that's high in cholesterol. Awesome. Because, you were saying some food that was really high, like shrimp or something, very high in cholesterol. And that's what I want to say. That's good. That's a good thing.
It's really interesting clinically. I will break through with some people and they will start eating these fatty products and cut out the sugars. And lo and behold, their cholesterol goes down. And it's this consistent pattern.
Right. So, isn't cholesterol, I think, is more sometimes
Blood levels of cholesterol.
Yeah,
Right.
Well, it could be an indication how many carbs you're eating as well.
Yeah.
So it's a whole different
It's a
discussion.
metabolic disorder. No, I always want to just bring it back to people because I know people are listening. They're like, oh, well, my cholesterol level is this. And if you know what I mean? It's so much more. I think you've elucidated the point that it's so much more complicated than we're led to believe. As the layperson and as a physician or any healthcare professional, they simplify things that are extremely complicated and they throw all these studies and concepts at you.
Right.
And I think on a your graphs and your evidence is so powerful, but on a very simple perspective, a lot of what you described is just like
Common sense.
you're a hunter-gatherer, you're a facultative carnivore, live like one, act like one.
Well, people are really confusing the concept of what's normal, what's natural. So right now, this is really bad. This light is terrible. So, part of what I really want to express to people is,
and it feels it though, just not to, but you feel it. If you really sit there, you're like, that feels bad. Mm-hmm. That does not feel good. Right. That warmer yellow light.
Well, I want you to think about this. So imagine it's December in a northern city, maybe in New York, and you're at the gym at 8 or 9 p.m. and there's this light on. It's basically, now LED, which is such a narrow bandwidth. It's telling your brain it's noon. And you're on a treadmill running for an hour. So basically what you're telling your body is it's the middle of summer. Don't make any melatonin. Destroy my melatonin. And I'm being chased by a tiger nonstop. Okay? So setting your alarm to wake up and work out early, don't do it. Get your sleep. Do not work out late at night with false lighting. This is telling your body all the wrong signals. We're sensors. We're animals that are supposed to be walking through the savannah, hearing a noise. Oh, is that a predator? And everything that we're telling our bodies is the complete wrong information. We're telling our bodies it's noon. We're destroying the melatonin production with the light in our eyes. And then we're feeding foods to ourselves that we're only ever meant at a specific time of year and not regular foods for us. So we're really literally telling our bodies, which are sensors, everything. And this is a massive issue and it's confusing. That's why I sort of want to go back and say, listen, we got to think about tribal life. What did your ancestors do? Well, they gathered by the fire and they didn't look at their phone late at night. And, all this stuff is super important for your long-term health of,
One thing I wanted to add, you were saying, connect back to your tribal ancestry, water, fire.
Earth, fire, and water.
Air,
the elements
earth, fire,
of life.
and water.
Yeah.
But also, if I can add something to it, love. Like, human interaction is so important. And I think probably you were getting at with the fire, sitting around the fire, being with each other and leaning, communal, leaning into each other, leaning into your relationships and not isolating yourself is also very, very powerful for your brain.
Well, right. So we have to think about, what does Mother Nature want from us? She wants us to make more. She doesn't care about you or what you want to do. She's going to tie a feeling of pleasure to what she wants. So think about what you enjoy in life. What's the best sensation in the world? They all have consequences, okay? But Mother Nature doesn't do anything by chance. This is an advantage. So why do people stick around after they can procreate? Well, a parent, a grandparent, a helper can change the survival of the tribe.
Okay.
So we really just want to boil all this down to, and when you're at a lack of scientific evidence, just think about, what was it like 30,000, 50,000 years ago? What did we have to do?
Have you, just all this tribal talk, it always makes me think about this great book I read, Sex at Dawn. Have you heard about that
I'm
one?
in the process of reading it.
Oh my God.
Your recommendation.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
We talk, so it's because it so connects with what you're saying, and he talks about Chris Ryan, and he talks about like how raising a child, how it is such a survival advantage to have a group taking care of the child, and how really like paternal identity was something that probably steered us away from tribalism, right? And so anyway, I don't want to, that's a whole different separate discussion. But
pagan sun worship and Christianity, and this is so vitamin D is a rabbit hole of race, religion, science. This is
I can see now how you connect, especially vitamin D, to all of these components of the human animal, because it is a hormone, and it does control so many things, and we've completely ignored it.
Completely.
It's interesting too that as I was finishing my residency, I was telling you this before the podcast, they started talking about this. They started doing studies. There was even a time where I was told to recommend 10,000 unit supplement once a week, which is not even.
It's great compared to every other doctor in town.
But get this. By the time I was finishing, so that was like first year resident. By the time I was finishing my residency, some study came out saying, "Oh, that's dangerous. Stop." And now I'm recommending 5,000 to 10,000 per day.
Absolutely.
Per day. And I'm comfortable doing that.
Well, think about who benefits from people having low vitamin D.
Sorry for
And
yelling.
it's not you and I. This is information that can and will change the course of history. Yeah. And this has been lost. This is information. History is repeating itself because we didn't heed the lessons of the past. And I brought you that book, basically as a book on New York in the 20s and how some of the building codes that we still have today were based on allowing more sunlight in. Yeah.
You know what? Massive. Like China, like a lot of their building codes are designed to try to increase the amount of nature that can access and permeate the cities. And so a lot of other countries are doing that. We don't talk about that so much in the States.
Right. Well, okay. So I'm from Canada, and I approached somebody at a dental school and said, I think that we should look at, would you guys be interested in doing some clinical trials? And they said, vitamin D, nope, not interested. And I said, wait a second. You already know this is required to absorb calcium, and you should know that it affects the immune system. The teeth are made of calcium, the bones are made of calcium, and the mouth's full of bacteria. Nah, let's not look into this. Why do you think that is? Well, I wish I believe in conspiracy theories, but no, it's not even that. These people are closed-minded because this is information that should have broken through 30 years ago, should have broken through 5 years ago. And when I personally this is somebody who is a prof at the school, and he said, "Yeah, they weren't interested." But then I started to ask him questions, and I said, "You're a pretty modern, hip guy. What did you start to do?" Because he lectures, and I goes, "Oh, I lecture on this." I go, "Well, what about vitamin K2?" He goes, "Oh, I don't know." And I said, "I told you about Weston Price. Did you read his book?" No. So this is a forward-thinking, educated guy living in a major metropolitan center who I personally sent him a briefing document, just making it easy. No.
I mean, that's been my experience once I started going down this journey and I started seeing such a profound effects in my life, my friends' lives, and then my patients' lives. I would share it with really brilliant physicians in the hospital. And the response was, where's the evidence? I don't think so. Stop making eye contact. I won't bore you with the stories because I've said them before, but the reality is it's like, they don't want to hear new stuff. They don't want to hear they've wrong.
Made their mind up.
They've made their mind up, and I'm sorry, but medicine is an art. You do not know everything. I don't know everything. You don't know everything. Certainly all those people in the hospital don't know a lot of things. And pretending that we know things we don't know is propagating this modern epidemic that you're talking about.
Absolutely.
And thank you for being so fired up and sharing with people, because it's inspiring to me, honestly. It's very inspiring.
But I want to, so I have a different level of ability to go out there because I'm going to go toe to toe, study to study. If someone wants to challenge me, and I actually welcome it. You want to show me a study that says that what I'm saying is wrong, I'll be happy to get into the weeds with you and say, let's look at the design of the study. Let's look at put it together.
But they don't do that. They don't do that. They just, that's what I'm saying. It's the closed-mindedness. Yeah. At first when I started talking about this, that's what I expected. So I'd like write down my quotations and sort of have that. They're not. They don't know the studies. They don't know. That's the whole problem, is they don't know. They are blindly following the dogma, and that's it.
But we also sort of found that the more educated a person was, the less likely they'd be open to this. And we couldn't really quite figure out what it was, why this was such a barrier to so many people. Because the minute, what it took for me was, both my parents died of pancreatic cancer one after the other, and I watched it. And I called their pancreatic cancer doctor after, and I just said, hey, this is Dr. Gould. I want to let you know, I want to ask you some questions. And he gave me some time. And this is the preeminent pancreatic cancer specialist in Canada, okay? And I said to him, I want to ask a couple questions. Do you monitor vitamin D? No. Do you supplement vitamin D? No. So this is what I'm saying to myself. Great. You helped my parents die a painful, terrible death. Yeah. They may not have listened to me. My parents, they don't want to listen to me, but he's a cool dude. And I'm like, when I got off the phone with him and I just said, both my parents died of pancreatic cancer. Do you think that he would go and investigate this for himself? Nope, just click. He said, oh yeah, there's some great stuff going on with vitamin D and vitamin C and vitamin E. And I'm like, you're done. Vitamin D is not a vitamin like those other things. This is different. And I wanted to say, like, look, dude, just go Google pancreatic cancer and vitamin D. You'll see Harvard has 2 peer-reviewed studies that you should look at. But I can't break through to this guy, and he's in control of the procedures and protocol. The only way, this is really what I figured out. Didn't matter where I went and who I wanted to talk to. People weren't listening. But to the average person who's suffering, and the reason I won't give this up is that 48 years was a long time to have a shitty life. Yeah. Okay? And to know that there are people walking around in their head like I was, this was torture. 48 years. I did not have a normal life. I could not be with anyone. I was completely obsessed with not shitting myself. Okay. Yeah. This is just one aspect of autoimmune disease. It's all caused by a lack of sunlight. So there isn't anyone who's going to try and dissuade me from the science that I've seen. There isn't anyone I'll be happy to have, like, you're going to have an argument with or a discussion with a vegan and you want to go toe to toe. I'm happy to do that. But more importantly, what I felt for most of my life was shame. The shame of having this disgusting disease, and it's gross. And now that feeling has left me for good. And there isn't anything that anyone's going to do to shame me, to get me down off this, because children are suffering and they're being mutilated. And we get to pediatric apnea. That's a horrific thing. I've gone to my people. I've gone to the powers that be, and no one wants to hear what I have to say. So what I decided to do was take my fight to the people and do that through cartoon characters, fun stuff. When I learned about the bees doing the waggle dance to communicate, these are insects, I likened the B vitamins to our bees, because the B vitamins are getting killed by modern living. Pesticides, glyphosate, toxicity, chemicals, all these things are killing the bees. It's basically showing us that we're destroying our environment. Canary in the coal mine. And that's what's happening to us.
Not to overuse that term, because I do use it a lot, but it's very, very true. And people need to open their eyes. The baseline life is unacceptable. Like, people's baseline of what they should feel like and how they should live their life has dropped. And for the last 3 years in the Western world, life expectancy has dropped,
Yeah.
and people are ignoring these things.
Yeah.
They continue to argue about nonsensical issues, demand double-blind placebo-controlled
Right.
studies, and
Right. Well, okay, but here's the thing: is that
marginalize
I have
people like
right.
you, which is insane.
Exactly, but I have all that stuff to even satisfy them. They're not
Huge
interested,
toxic,
right?
yeah.
So you have to understand this is a hotbed of controversy, and people who don't know anything about vitamin D will pipe up and they'll argue with me. And what I want to say is, like, I spent 5 years researching this, and I had 25 years of experience as a clinician. I've been a sick person myself, and your knowledge is off the cuff.
But they have Google, and they looked up the most recent article and some journal that's
Right.
Look,
Absolutely,
we haven't even
It's-
touched on sleep apnea. I think
know.
this has been like so interesting and mind blowing. I don't know.
Is there a way to recap the sleep apnea part?
Yeah,
Or-
well, so just real quickly, sleep apnea is a disease that's not even real. This is what some people look like after they've choked in their sleep for many years. So I know that you guys are getting excited about type 3 diabetes and Alzheimer's. I'm going to tell you that neurodegenerative diseases are multifactorial. They're caused by everything, but if you think they're going to come up with a pill that's going to prevent these diseases, this is what sleep apnea is. It's you stopping breathing over and over all night long in your sleep, and every time your oxygen drops, it tells your brain that you're dying, and you go into the fight or flight reaction, and then you wake up out of that deeper sleep, you destroy your sleep cycle, you ruin your chance for releasing all your healthy hormones, and then you go and do it again over and over and over again. 20, 30, 40 years, the people you see with the CPAP masks who are very obese, that's the end stage of this disease. This starts in childhood. Children are born with this, okay? Kids have this, and it's completely reversible if you understand how it works. You can't fix or repair something if you don't know how it works and why it broke down in the first place. And that's what I discovered. So sleep apnea is only one aspect of the true disease, and that's the disease of the autonomic nervous system. And this is a mitochondrial disease. It's caused by multifactorial issues. Vitamin D is a primary one. The battle for our health is going on in our mitochondria, and the agents who are fighting in there are my heroes of light. I'm telling a completely different story of our health, and I'm doing it with cartoon characters in a graphic novel way. So I have episodes of the Heroes of Light that introduce you to the characters who technically are the most important stars of your life. And I'm doing an interactive video game.
I love it.
I'm not
We're so
satisfied.
like-minded. We've got to team up with our SAPIEN and be part of a SAPIEN tribe.
I'd love to. I'm a different
Right,
voice.
Brian?
I'm a dentist, so I have a completely different perspective on this. And I'm young enough to still be able to accept new things, but I'm old enough to say, like, look, no, I've been at one location for 20 years. I can tell you a lot about health just from that one thing. But absolutely, we're tribe members. I say join our tribe is the modern hunter gatherer. So
that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create a platform. I mean, I'm not going to pretend to know as much science as you do, but what I do know is that I'm not going to spend my career giving people recommendations that are going to propagate illness and have them come back to me worse every year. So our goal with SAPIEN is to create a team of people to educate, to do it in a fun way, in a palatable way that's not off-putting and scary, which is sort of why I minimize the research stuff, because it doesn't convince anyone. What convinces people are cartoons, common sense, your story about how you recovered your health, Brian's passion. Like, these are things that people will change their behavior, You could talk about all the research. Right. It's too much.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
I'm just saying, to actually change their minds, right?
Absolutely. And there's all this biohacking stuff. Some guy came out with like 101 biohacks, and I was like, whoa, I'm into this stuff, and I can't.
And
just give me one. Yeah, just give me one thing. Just give me So, we're taking up a lot of time on this. I'd love to obviously share more information.
No, we'll have to have you back on because people need to hear what you have to say. People need to see your cartoons. They need to. I mean, look, we had one conversation, and that was enough to give me the confidence to recommend higher dose vitamin D, because it's scary. It's scary for doctors, right? So we've been talking about the lay people, but I'm telling you, doctors, it's not that they're not smart. Some of them are not so close-minded. but there's a culture of fear, right? And
Absolutely.
you know, it took you your 20 years, you have experience, you've gone through it. So yeah, you feel powerful, but I'm telling you, the young doctors coming out of residency that are super confused because they see what they're doing is wrong and they know there's another way. But now they have to stand up to this ivory tower or whatever you want to call it, you know, and it's scary, Joel.
Well, and again, so this is a different conversation for a different time, but think of this is that over the past 20 years here, I've seen what the dental insurance industry has done. I've seen being in Canada, being here, I bill medical and dental, and I basically work for these insurance companies. They've become the middleman that used to be before Uber. There was this guy called the dispatcher, and he kept the prices of renting a limousine at $500. And it was a nightmare. If you wanted to rent a limousine, it was expensive. It was a pain in the ass. We got rid of that guy, the middleman, who was sucking all the money out. And that's what Uber is. Uber is a concept. It's bringing the consumer to the service provider and cutting out the middleman and that's what medical insurance is doing to us. They're sucking out all this money. This isn't right. They shouldn't be able to profit. There should be a cap. These should be the people who are helping the administrative system. They're dictating what I do. Medical insurance, dental insurance, they are telling me what to do. They're telling me standard of care. And I told you that if UCLA switched their 30 to 100 from 20 to 50, that one thing is massive. That's massive. Show me one peer-reviewed study that allowed them to do that. No one can do that because they don't have to answer.
There's no supervision. I mean, look, I've been now in the private practice for over 3 years, and I can see what's happening. I'm being pushed because I want to take care of people. I'm being pushed out of the insurance game because they don't want me to help people. They don't want to pay for a vitamin D blood draw. They don't want to pay for me to make people better. And so, we got to, that's why there's this huge movement of direct primary care.
Absolutely. Okay, so when you think about it, if you get a colonoscopy at age 50, why aren't you getting a sleep study? Why aren't we looking at this? You spend 1/3 of your life sleeping. And I'm telling you that I've been in my location for 20 years. I see every person. I can spot the apnea a mile away. And this is obvious, but this is not known. So this is part of the information I want to share. And that's why I reached out to you guys. You know, I want to help people understand that, you know, I have something called the journey of the insomniac. What do people do when they can't sleep properly? Is they start with something they get at the pharmacy. They go to their doctor, get a prescription, and then they end up getting referred to a sleep doctor. They go to a sleep study. They get wrapped up in all those wires, and they come home with a CPAP. And they're like, wait a second, I just have a hard time sleeping. I don't want this. This isn't what I want in my life. And there's no real options. So what I want to present to people is something called sleep restoration, is the understanding that there needs to be a partnership with medicine and dentistry, because I work in the mouth. I do a device that keeps the airway open, but I can't do it alone. I need to have the doctors work with me. When I went to my area, to my local doctors, and introduced myself and gave them my sleep apnea stuff, they slammed the door in my face. You're just a dentist. What do you want? You know, so we're really stuck. So sleep apnea, vitamin D. Anyone who's listening to this, if your children snore or clench and grind their teeth, that's a severe vitamin D deficiency. Snoring is a vitamin D deficiency. We will see kids stop snoring in 2 days. 2 days supplemented with vitamin D. It's not your bed going up that makes a difference. This is the neural control of your airway. So, you know, basically, you know, we didn't get into the dosages or sun exposure or sunscreen. This is a massive topic that really requires a deeper dive. And, you know, one of the things that I'm doing is that I've had my own podcast from 5 years ago, and I'm rebooting that. And I'm excited to be able to bring this story forward and, you know, looking for compatriots like you guys to, you know, give people one aspect of this. Because, you know, to me, what you're doing is just so powerful. The voices before you, they were of a different generation. You are, you know, you get to read all that stuff because they were the groundbreakers and they struggled. And now you get to go, oh, yeah, okay, cool. Now I can bring this forward. And, you know, I don't leave them behind, but this is kind of where it has to go. So.
No, this is what, and I've noticed that. And I definitely feel like it's a new generation, and we need to embrace it instead of being fearful. Because we can't we can't let this continue the way it's going. It's brutal, man.
Right.
It's brutal.
Okay. So I've been down this rabbit hole for a long time. So, you know, the big money is going to come out for people like us. They're going to come out to get us and discredit us. And before I started to bring my stuff forward, I spent a lot of time thinking about, was I ready to bare my soul to the world? Because once I put my stuff out there, This is highly controversial. I'm just a dentist. I'm not a real medical doctor, number one. Number two is I'm telling people, you're saying eat fat. Doctors are saying, oh no, that's bad for you. And I'm saying go in the sun. And doctors are saying avoid the sun. My dermatologist told me, get out of the sun. No matter what you do, stay out of the sun. And so I'm going against all conventional medicine, coming from a completely different place. I'm basically taking a swing at a hornet's nest with a baseball bat. And some of that, those hornets are going to come and try and sting me. But it is what it is. That's why I said I have no shame. The story that I want to tell, someone wants to try and take me down by finding some embarrassing thing in the past, good luck. I told you, this isn't something I'm walking away from. Someone has to be an advocate for the children who all around the world are being surgerized. My own industry, and these are good people, they believe in what they're doing. They're trying to change everyone's airway. And I just want to leave you with one bit of common sense when it comes to something like sleep apnea, is that everyone's looking at the structure of the jaw and the size of the airway. And sure, that's a factor. But if you can breathe while you're awake, then you can breathe while you're asleep. There's nothing wrong with the structure. This is about the control of the paralysis and timing of sleep and the airway and the autonomic nervous system not having enough energy of the sun to control sleep and breathing. And once you stop sleeping properly, you start to break down more quickly than you repair and regenerate yourself. And vitamin D is linked into autophagy. Vitamin D is linked into the mitochondria. This is an element of life. Radiation, either the wrong kind from this lighting or not enough of natural radiation, is really powerful. I call it radiation rules. And you need to know that radiation isn't something you just get from a dental x-ray. This is how energy in our universe and our existence acts. We are energy. We are bombarded by energy. And not understanding that radiation is all around us, visible light is radiation. It's really, really critical to have a bigger or greater understanding of who we are as humans on this planet.
Wow.
This is awesome. This is awesome. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to have a part 2, and we can do your slides, or we can put those out there.
Sure.
I love this.
That's really good. Really good.
No, I do this every day. I go on the sun in midday when the sun is strong. I take off my shirt. I read. I do some work, and my family has a history of skin cancer. But I know that there's a huge difference between getting good sun and then going back inside and burning.
Right.
So yes, you can't burn. No one's saying to go get burnt.
Right. Okay. Well, the other thing, and that's the first thing I want to tell people, is that if you understand how powerful vitamin D is, don't go outside and bake yourself. Yeah. Because humans, as we currently live, aren't ready to accept that sunlight. Right. And what I want to put out there is that there are specific, and I sent you an article written by Stephanie Seneff. Okay. It's a seminal article that no one's paying attention to, having to do with cholesterol and sulfur. So in the Western world, we're sulfur deficient. The blue zones, all the places where people live to over 100, those are all volcanic rock, totally different mineral composition. So Stephanie Seneff
Right,
is...
It's not the whole grains that let them live a long time.
No. Well, listen, it's walking up those steep hills that are volcanic, a bunch of different things. But one of the missed components is that in sunlight, sulfur and cholesterol are joined together by endothelial nitric oxide synthase. This is a reaction that was supposed to be happening every time you went in the sun, if you had enough sulfur. So what I want to tell you is that you're going to be more protected than the average person because of the diet that you eat. But if your animals are wandering around eating grass that's out of the sulfur cycle, if they're not animals near a volcano, everything has less sulfur. Okay. So sulfur does two important things to our bodies in the form of cholesterol sulfate. Number one, it lines your endothelial cells, and that sulfur holds water in a gel form so that your red blood cells can scooch by there with no friction. But the second thing is in your skin. This starts to form a barrier, a cross-link barrier with something called filigrin. And sunlight itself creates this cross-link mesh that will reflect sunlight. Mother Nature's natural sunscreen, never mind a tan. Melanin, that's actually, the whole system. So people need more sunlight, but there's so much to it. Should they wear sunscreen? Should they put sunscreen on their kids? Is sunscreen even safe? Is it killing our ecosystems? Yes. Should you wear it? Depends. So there's so many fascinating rabbit holes to go down. And this is what I spent the last 5 years on. And I hope to share this information with people who are interested.
I mean, we got to have way more episodes. I have so many questions. I had to suppress a lot of it. But
okay, good. Well,
I really think you told a really powerful story about vitamin D and why people need to really open their minds to how they interpret their lab results. their
who's
supplements.
giving that information? If you go to a doctor who doesn't know how your body truly works, how can they give you that advice? It's like going to a personal trainer who's out of shape. Are you going to trust them? Going to a dentist with bad teeth.
This keeps coming up. The unhealthy obese doctor. Is that a good thing?
Talk to Dr. Ken Berry about this. We got into it on the podcast. Well, we got to go. We got to wrap this up. we can go on forever.
I love it. So good.
But let's come back again with Dr. Joel. And until next time, thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.